Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today, we are tackling a universally dreaded scenario that happens every single Monday morning in offices, classrooms, and coffee shops literally around the world. It's that exact moment of small talk where you're suddenly put on the spot, and instead of sounding like your usual brilliant self, you end up sounding like a walking, talking grammar textbook. But today, we're going to fix that. In this explainer, we're diving into some incredibly useful insights derived straight from our source material on everyday conversational English.
So, I want you to be totally honest with me for a second. When someone casually walks up to you and asks, "What did you do last weekend?" How do you feel? Do your palms get a little sweaty? Does your heart race just a tiny bit as you frantically try to translate your Saturday activities into English in your head? Well, if you usually answer with a robotic, "I went to the store, it was good," then you are in the exact right place. We're going to transform that anxiety into total confidence. Okay, here's our chronological roadmap for today. We'll start with mastering the weekend question, then walk step by step through phase 1, weekend prep, phase 2, the gatherings, and phase 3, winding down. Finally, we'll wrap up with put it into practice. Let's jump right into section 1, mastering the weekend question, focusing on overcoming small talk anxiety. Our absolute main goal here is to move completely away from stiff, textbook answers and start embracing the natural, dynamic phrasing that native speakers actually use. A really great way to start describing your weekend is by setting the baseline. A lot of the time, we just don't want a crazy weekend. We just want to keep it simple. This means you are actively avoiding an overloaded or hectic schedule. You're intentionally not doing too much. And here's a fun, slightly surprising fact from our source. There's actually a famous acronym in English based on this phrase called KISS, which stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. Now, you definitely don't need to call anyone stupid, but it really goes to show just how deeply embedded the desire to keep it simple is in conversational English. That brings us to section 2, phase 1, weekend prep, getting ready for guests. Because let's face it, sometimes, despite our best efforts to keep things simple, the weekend gets busy. Our source describes preparing her house to host a neighborhood seed exchange. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the absolute easiest ways to level up your speaking. Think about the phrase, "I prepared food." It's grammatically perfect, sure, but a bit formal, right? Swapping that formal prepared for the natural shortened prepped instantly makes you sound like you're having a casual chat with a friend rather than giving a formal presentation to a board of directors. As she was getting ready for her guests, the host described her prep perfectly. She said, "I sent out text reminders, tidied up, and told my kids to be on their best behavior." Notice the specific word choices here. She didn't just clean, she tidied up, which is this beautifully natural phrasal verb meaning to put away the mess and make the house look nice for guests. And telling your kids to be on their best behavior, that's a fixed phrase, a really natural collocation we use when we want someone, usually kids, but hey, sometimes adults on a first date, to act perfectly polite. Let's see how this all builds chronologically. We start with the afternoon food prep, followed by the late afternoon arrival of the neighbors. By evening, the host is off to a book club, and finally, by 10 p.m., a complete crash. Having a visual flow like this in your mind really helps you structure your own weekend stories when you're chatting with colleagues on Monday. Moving right along to section 3, phase 2, the gatherings, navigating social events naturally. This is the highly social phase of the weekend journey, where the creator hosted her neighbors and then immediately transitioned to a totally different event, a rooftop bar book club. When her guests arrived, she didn't just say they arrived. She said her neighbors showed up. Now, why use that specific phrasal verb? Because show up carries this excellent, subtle nuance of surprise. When you host a casual get-together, you often don't know exactly who or how many people will actually walk through the door. Saying 8 neighbors showed up implies that element of the unknown being resolved. It's so much more descriptive than just stating they arrived. Once they showed up, the atmosphere was fantastic. They were hyped to bond over the garden beds. Instead of using the standard word excited, tossing in the conversational synonym hyped injects so much more energy into your story. And what were they doing? They were bonding, creating closer relationship ties over the specific contained planting areas in the yard known as garden beds. It paints a really vivid, energetic picture. But of course, one event ended and another was right about to begin. The host noted she just had a moment to catch her breath. So the crucial takeaway here is understanding that this is not a literal lack of oxygen. She wasn't actually gasping for air. Catching your breath is a figurative mental pause. It's that brief, precious moment where you gather your thoughts, relax your shoulders, and mentally recover before you move on to the next thing on your hectic schedule. Now, what's really interesting is how simple this next upgrade is. After catching her breath, it was time for the book club. Instead of saying, I am going out or I am going home, changing the verb to head absolutely elevates your English immediately. Heading out to the book club or heading home emphasizes the actual start of the journey. It's a tiny little tweak, but native speakers use it constantly to sound more dynamic. Before heading out, she kissed her kids goodnight. This is a perfect opportunity to break down 3 distinct ways this phrasing works. First, there's the literal kissed goodnight right before bed. Second, kissed goodbye, which is the literal action when you're leaving a location. But the third one, that's where the flavor is. Kissed him goodbye can also mean good riddance. In fact, our source points out with a bit of humor that there are plenty of country music songs where kissing someone goodbye means you absolutely never want to see their face again. So she heads out to the Rooftop Bar Book Club, and they spent the evening discussing how the book turned out. To turn out means to discuss the unknown or surprising conclusion of an event or story. You use this whenever there's an element of suspense. And the funny thing here, it turned out that neither the host nor her friends actually liked the book they were supposed to be reading. But hey, they loved the me time at the rooftop bar. This brings us to section 4, phase 3, winding down, the end of a hectic day. The socializing has finally come to an end, the rooftop bar is closing out, and it's time for the rest to begin. When you have a day packed with seed exchanges and book clubs, you've experienced a very specific type of tiredness. You become socially exhausted. This is such a relatable concept, especially for all my introverts out there. It's completely separate from physical exhaustion. You didn't run a marathon. But because you spent hours socializing, making conversation, and interacting with diverse groups of people, your social battery is just completely drained. Which leads us perfectly to this incredibly relatable quote. By the time I got home, it was 10 p.m. I was socially exhausted and just crashed. Notice the phrase by the time. It links 2 simultaneous events on a timeline. The very moment she arrived, she was already exhausted. And that word crashed, it perfectly captures that heavy physical sensation